This meeting is being recorded.
All right, excellent. Thank you for doing that. Tatalaf, Himima Kala Tiwama, good day again to everybody. For those who weren't here at the very beginning, my name is Joel Moffitt. I serve as the Director of Environmental and Special Projects for Native Americans in Philanthropy. I'm a citizen of the Nez Perce tribe from Idaho, and I'm zooming in from across the Salish Sea on Suquamish tribal territory in the Pacific Northwest, right across from Seattle. I want to again thank the United South and Eastern Tribes for hosting this listening session. Much appreciation for all the work in this gathering. I'd like to hand it over to Dee Sabatis from USET to provide a welcome.
Thank you. I want to also thank tribal leadership for making space for me to welcome participants to the session today. As Joel stated, my name is Dee Sabatis. I am a citizen of the Passamaquoddy tribe at Indian Township, located here in northern Maine. I currently serve as the Deputy Director for United South and Eastern Tribes and United South and Eastern Tribes Sovereignty Protection Fund. I've been with the organization for 18 years and continue to learn about the great work of our tribal nations each day. So looking forward to hearing the discussion. On behalf of USET, I want to acknowledge and thank the Native Americans in Philanthropy for our collaborative partnership and doing the groundwork to put this important session together today. On average, only 1% to 2% of all philanthropy benefits Indian country directly. So the work we're doing today is imperative to bringing greater interest. It gives tribal nations the opportunity to diversify their funding portfolio beyond the federal funding space. The panelists today bring a wealth of expertise, and we hope that you all take away the richness of knowledge, ideas, and new relations. I want to thank the panelists and the session participants for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this session with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. And thanks to all the tribes within the USET region for all they do for Indian country, and especially for the esteemed panelists that we're going to introduce later on. Next, I'd like to hand it over to our CEO here at Native Americans in Philanthropy, Mr. Eric Stegman, for a welcome from our team.
Thank you, Joel, and welcome everyone, and much gratitude to Chief Malerba for the beautiful opening and starting us in a good way. And just wanted to extend gratitude to Dee and her whole team at USET for collaborating with us on this important work. I'm Eric. I'm the CEO here at Native Americans in Philanthropy. My mother's family is from the Carry the Kettle Dakota First Nation in present-day Saskatchewan. And this has been a dream of mine and Greg and many others on our team for some time, and just to see where this Tribal Nations Initiative is going really warms my heart. I've spent most of my life working with tribal leaders and working on tribal policy matters and serving our tribal nations. But as I got into this role where we're advocating for our communities to get more philanthropic dollars into our communities, I realized there really wasn't a place for tribal leaders and staff to engage with philanthropy in a strategic way, in a way that supports our self-determination, our programs, the kinds of systems that we want to build to ensure our thriving future for our people. And so we wanted to change that. But one of the things I really appreciated when I was kicking off these early conversations with Greg, our VP of Tribal Nations Engagement, was he said we need to go and listen to the tribal leaders first. And so this is our effort in doing that. And this is one of many listening sessions we've been doing regionally. And it's just been really inspiring to hear not just about the challenges, but mostly about the untapped opportunities that our tribes bring to the philanthropic sector. I think too often a lot of these big funders out there don't realize all the unique legal and political power we bring, the ways all of you are innovating to build all sorts of amazing programs for your people. And that's what we're here to do, to really help partner with you in a new way, and to have tribes and their staff setting that table for themselves and asking funders to come and support them in the ways that we need them to. So just really honored to be here with all of you and excited to listen to this conversation. I'll kick it back over to Joel.
Thank you, Eric. And yeah, you perfectly encapsulated the purpose of our listening session here today. This is our third in a series of 6 listening sessions that we're doing all across Indian country. We started off in the Pacific Northwest and then moved to the California, Hawaii, Nevada region, and now we're here on the East Coast. And we have gotten a wealth of knowledge from our tribal nations, and that was the main purpose, was to reach out and have direct conversations with tribal nations, their leaders and their staff, to understand how have you engaged in philanthropy with foundations, how have you engaged in giving yourselves to your communities, and what needs that you see in your community that the philanthropic sector could help assist with. And also to look at making sure that this is an Indigenous and tribally led effort, which is a total shift within the philanthropic sector. So this is a big undertaking that NAP has started with our Tribal Nations Initiative. And the leader in that initiative is Greg Mastin, Vice President of Tribal Nations Engagement. And I'd like to pass it over to Greg now for some discussion about a deeper dive into how we're going to accomplish all those goals.
Thank you, Joel. And ayukui to everybody out there in virtual land. I'm so thankful that you could all join us today. As Joel mentioned, my name is Greg Mastin. I'm a member of the Yurok tribe, and I'm also a descendant of the Hupa and Crook peoples in Northern California. So my official title is I'm Vice President of Tribal Nations Engagement and Special Projects here at Native Americans in Philanthropy. And right now, what I really want to talk to you all about is a survey that is really important. So we're going to put it in the chat right now. So Kelsey, if you could put the link to the survey in the chat, I'd really appreciate it. If you are Native American or Alaska Native, or you work for a tribal nation, please take the time to fill out this survey, because it is vitally important, and it should only take you about 5 to maybe 10 minutes. I think when I took it, it took me maybe 4 minutes. So please start right now as I'm talking. That's kind of the whole point, because I'd rather you get it done right away. And then that way you can fully enjoy our guest speakers that are coming up here in the next few minutes. And then to clarify, this survey is only for our participants today that can speak to the needs of their Native community, because we're trying to quantify the needs and the programs of our Native communities. So for those of you that are from the philanthropy sector, not directly linked to a tribal nation, we're grateful that you're here, and thank you for being here, and welcome. But you don't have to fill out this particular survey. And so what's unique about today's session is that not only will we hear from some amazing speakers and about their experiences, but you will also, as participants, have the chance to answer the same questions and give input on the specific needs of your community. So as we're trying to elevate awareness and advocate for more funding to support our Native communities, we want to start with you all first, and we want to hear from you on what are the needs of your communities and your programs, and what how could philanthropy best support your communities. So this is why this survey is so important. We know that our Native communities are vastly underrepresented and underserved. So from the philanthropic sector. So last year alone in the US, over $490 billion went out from the philanthropy sector to support various programs and initiatives. And out of that funding, less than 0.5% of that went to support our Native programs, and even far less to tribes. We don't actually know the number of how much made its way to tribes, but I think much, much less than that number. So there is a tremendous opportunity for more investments to support your programs, but we need to hear from you. So again, this is why this survey is so important. So please take the time to fill it out. If you haven't started, click on it right now and get that started. And if it helps, I know a little bribery doesn't hurt. So after completing the survey, you can enter into a drawing, and the winner will get a $100 gift card that can be used at most of the national retailers. So one last time, please fill it out. Okay, So I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists today. I know you'll hear really important information about their communities and the work that they're doing, and also information about how we can work better with philanthropy. And we do have some exciting announcements for you all at the end. So I hope you stay clear through to the end. So that's it for now for me. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it back to Joel.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. And the data that's collected from the survey is going to be so key for us to understand Indian country, the priorities and the needs, and the programming that's already in action on the ground on reservations, but also how you would like to engage with philanthropy. How you would like to develop relationships with the sector that isn't just based on transactions, but that there is a relationship being built up that's multi-year and solid. The outcome after the full 6 listening sessions will be a report, and that data is going to be central to the findings in that report to help us to advocate on behalf of your tribes. So with that being said, we'd like to dive into the panel, and we have an esteemed group of panelists here today to address just those topics that we talked about. I'd like to hand it over first to Chief Ann Richardson to introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be here and honored to be with you today. Chief Richardson from the Rappahannock Tribe in Virginia.
Great to see you, Chief Ann. Next, Chairman Cernick.
Well, hello, everybody. I know we're on all different times here across the country, so I can't say good morning because it's afternoon here in Central Time. But I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to join the conversation. It is an honor as chairman of the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana to be here, to collaborate, and just to get the conversation moving of all the wonderful things happening in Indian country and even greater things on the horizon.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. And on to another member of your council, Miss Crystal Williams.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I had to do a last minute thing with my internet connection, but good afternoon. My name is Crystal Williams. I am currently the vice chairman for the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana. We have about just under 1,000 members here in our small town of Elton, Louisiana, but our members are gathered all around the United States. And but we're very, very glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. And our final panelist, Charlene Virgilio.
Thanks, Joel. Thank you so much for hosting this listening session. I'm so happy to be a part of this today. I am the executive director of Four Directions Development Corporation, which is a Native American community development financial institution, the only one in New England and one of 70 across the United States.
Well, thank you for being here, Charlene. And just as some information for the attendees, if you would like to put some questions into the chat, we'd appreciate it. And if there's time at the end of our questions for the panelists, that we'll get to yours. And just a reminder, there's a link in the chat as well for the survey. So hopefully you've already started that. The first question I'd like to ask is for Chief Ann Richardson. We know tribes often rely on federal and/or tribal funds to support their programs and services. Does philanthropy play a role in supporting your tribal nation's programs and initiatives? Have you engaged in philanthropy, and what, if any, barriers have you experienced?
Well, we have engaged in philanthropy, and I have found in years of working with as non-native foundations is that they really almost like they are afraid of us. And I don't know if they're afraid that we want continued support every year, or if we're expecting that, or if it's just the fact that they think we get federal money and we don't need it. But I usually use these funds for things that are not an ongoing thing. So we have a sovereignty conference every year. And that has been one of the projects that we were able to use that money for. We are now looking at land back initiative, and that is also one of the projects that can be utilized for. But mostly the program services go under the federal government's programs. But it has been a barrier, and it has been difficult to get this money. I think it's important for tribal philanthropy to know and understand what the needs are in Indian country, because they understand the barriers that we face with racism and disempowerment policy issues in various states. And they are aware of having to deal with those things. So it's important that Indian country knows what the needs are.
Could you expand a little bit more on the barriers and what you've been hearing from foundations on why they have not been so eager to engage with your tribe?
Well, we're small tribes here in Virginia and just recently recognized. And so I think that maybe foundations feel like there's some kind of entitlement, or if they fund us, then other people may get upset about it. Foundations here are pretty racially divided, if you know what I mean. And so Native Americans never come into that playing field. And when they do, it's not been really looked at that favorable.
Thank you for that insight. And we've experienced that as well, talking with the other regions and tribes. This is tribes have not been in this space historically with foundations, and so that they can understand our communities, our history, our culture, where we come from, those horrific tragedies that we've had to weather. Just like you said, your tribe was terminated, and you've had to reconstitute and reconnect and get re-recognized, and then restore your land, your waters, your culture. So thank you for sharing that. The next question goes to Charlene. You do amazing work to support your tribal communities. Please briefly share your programs with us. And does philanthropy play a role in supporting your programs and initiatives? How have you engaged philanthropy, and what, if any, barriers have you experienced?
Well, we have a unique mission here, and we're all about improving the social and economic conditions of the 4 tribes in Maine. We've been an organization in existence for over 20 years, and part of why we're in place is because we recognized there was a lack of capital for Indian country. So we do a lot of lending activity, but also around programs for residential lending, or small business lending, or tribal lending. We also do a lot of wraparound services or technical assistance to help all of the programs that we have succeed. So when we look at what we're doing, it's about looking at everything from a holistic perspective, and all of our programs are connected. And what that means is when we're looking from a community development program perspective to develop housing for tribes, we're in one of our projects, we're looking to also stand up a Native American construction business to build those homes. And we're also using our financial capabilities program to get people in our tribes to be borrow ready for when the homes are ready. And then that produces home ownership. So one of the things that we focus on is really what we call ecolistic. It's a new term we're trademarking because we really look to try to create an ecosystem and address everything on a holistic basis, really trying to capitalize on all the programs, offerings and programs that we have. From a philanthropic standpoint, we've experienced some different barriers. We definitely have support from philanthropy. I have to say that of about $1.6 million that we've raised. Recently, about 156,000 of that is from philanthropic partners. But we do have a small landscape of people that we work with. And in some cases, we have to compete with our tribes. And so one of the first things we do is when we're going after some money, we'd like to find out what are the tribes doing, because we will remove ourselves if we know our tribal communities are going after those dollars, because we don't want to compete with them. One thing that's unique about us, if you look over our history, we've deployed about 19 million into Indian country in Maine. But so sometimes foundations will look at us and say, wow, you've got a great budget, you've got a lot of money, you may not need as much help as some of our smaller tribal nonprofits. So sometimes our size and our breadth of what we offer sometimes works against us. So that is sometimes interesting, but some of the things that we do really are big projects. So our needs are a little bit different, a little bit more broad. I'd say one of the other barriers that we have, one thing that we've learned is when you're doing community development, economic development activity, housing development, all of these things, there are long lead times. And with long lead times requires multi-year funding. So often what we find is we are successful at getting an annual award, but when you have long lead times, multi-year development, we really would have a huge benefit by having some multi-year funding support. We're very small groups, small teams, and we have a few precious resources, and to have to compete for funding and reapply each year takes away from us really doing the work of what we're trying to do to improve the economic prosperity of our people. I would say also we've been successful with lending capital from our philanthropic partners, but often it does not come with companion operating funds. And it costs us money to deploy funds, to deploy capital. So often we look for opportunities where when we get that lending capital, can we also have an operating grant to support the programs to deploy that? So I think from the standpoint of our programs and services, it's very important, but as a percentage of our total funding, it's very small, and we'd love to see that get increased.
Thank you, Charlene. Appreciate that, and that's tremendous, the work that you're doing up in Maine. Yeah, it seems like a lot. Like, I could see people saying, "Oh, 19 million," but for the needs and the projects out there, it's insufficient, and we see that on not only in the philanthropic sector, but as you know, the tribal leaders on this call know, we see that in the federal government as well. And so we just need to keep telling our story. We need to keep educating them on the actual needs and priorities on the ground, and how the resources that are provided are much needed, and we're thankful for them, but they are insufficient to tackle the entirety of the issues. And going to that story and that data, just want to remind everyone that there's a link in the chat for our survey. So we're trying to quantify these needs, these priorities, these stories for our report out at the end of all of our listening sessions, so that we can fully advocate for you with the philanthropic sector and with our partners. So appreciate that. If you could go and fill out that survey. And the next question we have for our panelists goes back to Chief Ann. Oh, she seems to step out. So I will go on to the next. I will go back to Charlene for the next question. What are your top needs in the Native communities you serve up in Maine? Where do you feel philanthropy's funding could best be used to support these communities?
I hope I have the rest of the day to talk about this, but I'll only take a few minutes. I just want to salute you for gathering data because it is so critical to quantify what our needs are. And I also heard the fact that we really need to listen. To have a listening session is so important. So before we embarked on our last strategic journey, we invested 70 hours of tribal listening sessions with our chiefs, our vice chiefs, and many other leaders. We followed up with a 190 question survey across every tribal admin department, because although we anecdotally know what the needs are, we know that we have lack of capital, lack of affordable homes, all what we live in food deserts, high poverty, high unemployment. We have so many things that we know intuitively, but we really felt we needed to back it up with data. And we also wanted to understand what else can we do? You know, is the value of what we're bringing as an organization important and valuable to you? And if we could do more, what would you like to see? So that data was so informative. It really drove everything that we've done since we've collected that data. And from the standpoint of what those top needs were, I don't think anybody would be surprised. 75% of our tribal communities have housing needs or housing shortages and no funding to support those shortfalls. We looked at what are the plans that you have in place? Do you have a comprehensive economic development strategy, a land use plan, community plan, all of those things? Some tribes only had 20% of what we thought the 5 plans they should have in place. And the highest we had was 70%. We also looked at the dependency on federal funding from 51 to 100%. It's significant. And when there are tribal entities in place to help offset and create revenue streams, they're not having the impact that we expect. Our tribes are not gaming tribes, so it's really difficult. We have a difficult relationship with the state, but we also looked at what are some of the other things. 0% workforce development programs, leadership development programs, and they also recognize that there was a need for intertribal collaboration. So with all of that, those were the key needs that we found out, and that's where we set off to do our work. And then when you look at all of those needs that we have, we started to look at what else can we do besides lending capital, because we deploy about $1 to $2 million a year in housing loans and other community loans, but there was more that we needed to do. So if we wanted to work as partners and have intertribal work, we said we need a Wabanaki consortium, which is collectively what our tribes in Maine are often referred to as the Wabanaki, in honor of our Wabanaki Confederacy history. And so that's 150,000. We don't have tribal broadband. Well, if we put a resource in to help do that, that's 160,000. So we kept going on, and it's all of a sudden it's $6.1 million of projects that aren't related to just capital. And so we know what our needs are. So from that perspective, we felt like we had the data, we know what the needs are, but where can we help? And so from a where can we help, I think it's already been said. We need to have some flexibility. Philanthropic support is essential, critical, crucial. It's like the wind beneath our wings. And so it's really important, because if we want to do more than just lending capital or more than just doing more business development activity, it's so much more flexible than the federal funding. We look at federal funding, almost for every dollar we get in federal funding, we're supported by CDFI, ANA. For many of our initiatives, it's 40 to 50 cents on every dollar. And so to have that flexibility in operating capital or operational funding is really critical to our mission. I think the other thing I heard is relationships. When we work with our philanthropic partners, they're long-term relationships. We've been working with one funder for over 10 years, and it's been an amazing journey, but over the last 2 years, our relationship has really blossomed and really has produced some wonderful things. But we look to really have partnerships. And sometimes that means there's not always a match in mission. We may not be able to accept some funding from some sources. I already mentioned multi-year funding. And I guess one of the last two things I would want to say is that even when we are successful in getting federal funding, often it comes with match. And if we can get match from our philanthropic partners, it would be wonderful. Down payment assistance, match savings, all of these things, we've been able to leverage dollars in many different ways, but that's really critical. And then I guess I just want to say in closing that when everything we've learned from our data gathering, we've learned that even if we deployed all of our capital, it does not produce sustainable success. And so I think having that companion business development services funding is really critical. Are we creating the next generation of small business owners, native artisans, et cetera? So I think that's really important. And I'd just like to say to our philanthropic partners that we love taking this journey with you and knowing that you're on the same path with us. That support that you give is so much more important than dollars. So I think there's a lot of ways that can help, but I appreciate the journey we've taken together and I look for more to come.
Thank you, Charlene. Those are very, very important points. And we've heard that through the other listening sessions as well, specifically about multi-year funding is much needed to support the sustainable infrastructure within the nonprofits, but also at the tribes and their work within the communities. And then matching has been a huge barrier for tribes, for nonprofits who work with Indian communities. And so that is something that we've heard loud and clear as well. Thank you for that. There is a question in the chat specifically for you. Has LISC or any other CDFIs been cooperative, or have they been allies in your work?
Absolutely. They're great partners. Rural LISC is, I mentioned, our housing project. They've been instrumental in that. It's been 5 years in development when I talk about long lead times. And we partner a lot. So we're the only Native American CDFI in Maine, but there's 10 others. And so when we have large project requirements, we will often partner with peer CDFIs, and the CDFI fund is very instrumental to our funding.
Excellent. Next question is for Chief Ann Richardson. What are the top needs in your community, and where do you feel philanthropy's funding could best be used to support Rappahannock community?
Well, some of the top needs in our community are elder care, which our funding helped us with. But we're looking at doing a Native American elder home for some of the elders in the community. And I guess the philanthropic community could really help with that, even though some of it could be program dollars funded through the federal government, but some of that requires match as well. And so that would be one of the top priorities. The other is economic development. As small tribes, and we're just getting started with economic development, as the lady was saying earlier, even A&A grants, they're limited in what you can do with them. Whereas if we want to do business development on a larger scale, then we would have to have capital infused into those projects. And having philanthropy partner with us would be great in that area as well. And also the land back, one of the things I'm trying to do is put together a regional fund. Because when you say land back for tribes, your conservation agencies here in the state of Virginia and your federal agencies have been working together forever to buy land for conservation purposes. But when you throw a Native American tribe getting land back in the mix of it, everything comes to a grinding halt, and you have to really overcome that. And so to be able to have access to empower tribes to be even at the table when these deals are being made to get land back would be really beneficial for the sovereignty of the tribes.
Thank you for that, Chief Ann, and I appreciate your perspective from a tribe who's, yeah, like I said, just being restored and regaining their land, and on the East Coast. It is, there are so many varied stories and communities within Indian country. So thank you for that. We have a couple questions in the chat that I just wanted to inform the attendees that I'll get to those at the end, because we just want to make sure we have sufficient time for our Coushatta tribal representatives. And so next I will go to Chairman Cernick from Coushatta. Your tribal giving program has helped so many worthy causes. Please share your tribe's approach and processes to your philanthropic work. Can you share an example of a project or an initiative your tribe supported that you are particularly proud of?
I can. And first, I want to say thank you, Joel, for this wonderful invitation. We're here in Southwest Louisiana. It's about 80 degrees outside. It's a beautiful day. So I'm very happy to be a part of this panel and to hear these wonderful discussions and to share our own, because I represent a wonderful tribe, a tribe that, throughout our history, I think can be seen as philanthropic in everything that they have always done, even at our moments when we didn't have a lot, when we weren't progressing, when we weren't diversifying, when we didn't have economic builders in the community. The stories that I hear from our elders is that we've always been a people that give. We've always been a people that look out for one another. And I think that story is reverberated across Indian country. You see that in all these tribes that you visit, the stories. So the connection that I feel is amazing. Here, I'm in my first year as the chairman of the Coushatta tribe. And with that, what I've done is I look to our past. I look at our elders. I look at the people who paved the way ahead of us. And the guys ahead of me, they saw this kind of thing coming. Our tribe's always going to help people. And what better way to create a place for our tribe to help people than to create a Chairman's Cup Foundation, which is what they did in 2002. Our leadership at that time said, let's build a fundraiser to be able to help tribes, help other, I call them churches and schools, because we do so much work with local churches and schools. 501c3 donations are a part of who we are now. But even before the Chairman's Cup was created, our tribe was a giving people. We served one another. We give. There's so many stories that I have of our members who give even when they don't have things to give. And so that story, that's something that I'm very proud of. And starting in 2002 with the Chairman's Cup Foundation, we were able to raise money through what it is. It's a golf tournament. And I have to say this because I believe it's true. It's the best golf tournament in the South. So if anybody needs a getaway come the fall, we have a 3-day event this year where we really work hard to give our best back to those who are giving to us. And I'm very proud to say that the past year, the Chairman's Cup Foundation rose the most money in the history that it's been invented. So it was over $250,000 that was raised from one golf tournament. And I'm very proud of that because we had a wonderful staff and crew that really made an effort to say thank you to those helping us. Through this foundation, we're able to dedicate funds to schools, to churches, to organizations that our members are a part of. I was looking through the list this morning. We actually give more than I realize. Sometimes you kind of get in the day-to-day grind and you kind of forget about things. But our goal is that we touch the lives of those who are closest to us, that we make a difference in our communities around us. one of the things as coming into this new leadership role has taught me is that we should never forget where we came from. We are a humble people, and we always want to be giving back. Our community is about families. It's about the word community we use a lot because everything we do is instilled and ingrained in us to give back to our roots, to show homage to the resources that brought us to this point. I'm a product of my educational system in my tribe. I'm so thankful for the groundwork that was laid to be able to use those opportunities to give back to your tribe now. One of the things that you mentioned in the question was, what is something that you're most proud of? I would have to say the philanthropic work that I'm most proud of is something that's not monetary. I make an Indian corn soup, which I know all tribes have. So I know everybody listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. Our version of the corn soup is called chawaka. And it's a tradition that was passed down from my grandfather through my family, where we prepare a corn soup. Look, I even brought a prop today. We used these native river cane baskets to help sift the corn that we pound out of a tree stump. It's a whole process. I know everybody has their own, but it also brings us back to our past. Our ancestors survived off this corn soup. Whenever you had to feed a lot of people, corn and water did the job. And these are the little things that I never want to forget, that we always want to remember and give back to our community. I do that at least 2 times a month in our community just to bring people together. Not too many people make it anymore. We still have some people that make it. But what I do is try to bring the culture in, remember those things that brought us to this point, and the giving and the philanthropic work of our tribe. I think it's evident. It's seen throughout our region here in the South. And my vice chairwoman mentioned it earlier. The Coshada tribe of Louisiana is all over the country now. We've expanded. We're sending our tribal members to school to get education from coast to coast, and some even out of the country. So those are things that we're very proud of. We're very happy to see. And the proud moments of the Chawaka, it's all about a community effort for me. What I try to do is to say, look, we're never going to forget our community around us. Of course, we're always going to help with those dollars. Any chance we can get, we're going to push those to programs that we see are needing them, where the community's needs need to be met, and that could be so many different areas. And like I said, reading through the list, it's very humbling to see the different programs that we've helped out, whether it's autism awareness, whether it's cancer research. There's a lot of very good big and small projects that we push money towards. But I believe it's the efforts that don't include monetary donations all the time. I believe it's community volleyball tournaments. I think we just got into cornhole recently. We have cornhole tournaments. We do softball. We do of course we eat with all of these events because natives, that's how we communicate. We all cook for one another. And to see the community staying together is what makes my heart and my job so much fun, because I get to see growth throughout our tribe. We grow as a tribe, but yet we still stay small enough to remember those things that got us here. So as we continue on, and trust me, I want to see our tribe grow just like every other tribe. We want business ventures here. We want to see economic development. We want to see the growth of our membership. I also want us to remember what got us there. And those are the things that I take passionate in my job every day, because I represent a wonderful group of people. I represent a wonderful tribe down here in the South. And to see and hear some of the stories today of ways that we can infuse those good, successful ideas into our community, that makes me happy. And I hope that those listening to remembers their elders, remembers their culture, remember the things that got us to this point. Because as Native Americans, I'm so proud and so excited at the things that we can do in the future. And that's kind of what I had to say. But you know, this giving back, it reminds me a lot of volunteering. We've created community cleanup days on a reservation to where we just meet together to pick up trash, to do some cleanup, just to show people, that we don't have to be paid to do things. We're here, we're volunteering our time because we want to see our community become a better place. And to me, if we have your community, you'll always make it as a tribe. Community is like the heartbeat of your tribe. Your elders are your heartbeat. And if we safeguard those things, boy, I tell you what, the sky's the limit. And I'm very thankful to be a part of this discussion. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Chairman. And you got a shout out in the chat. So Jonathan's Chewacca is the best.
Hey, they call me Chewacca Man. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, I can't wait to try it. You know, Greg and I, when you said you have the best golf tournament in the South, that we got excited. We're gonna have to come down and visit you and try your Chewacca too. but you spoke to something really central, and that's the fact that tribes all across the country have always been giving, have always been generous. I'm here in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, and we have what's called potlatches. We have potlatch culture where throughout the year we harvest and gather and make items, and then we have a potlatch and we give it all away. So we don't hoard and collect the wealth, but we give it out. And we've been doing that for thousands and thousands of years. And and there's similar ceremonies all across this continent. And so I really appreciate you sharing that and reminding us that we need to connect to that culture, to that history, to the ancestors who carried on that way of life, and that we are trying to preserve going forward. And now it's just having these foundations in the philanthropic sector invest in that work so we can build it and grow it, the work that we've always done. And so I really appreciate you sharing that story. Next question is for the Vice Chair Williams from Coshada. What opportunities do you see in growing tribal impacts in philanthropy? And what do you see as needed to support and elevate tribal philanthropic work?
First of all, I want to thank you, Joel, and Greg for inviting the Coshada tribe to this panel. There are numerous opportunities that we have in front of us. We've talked about it today, as Chief Richardson has discussed the common needs in our tribal communities. And as Ms. Charlene mentioned, her work with the Four Winds Corporation, the initiative to support and give the resource is there. We're here. But this is the first step. This is what I believe in finding what tribes need and then locating those resources to support those needs, and probably to what extent the tribes are willing to help or to give. But as Chairman Cernick mentioned, philanthropy is not just about monetary support, but it's time, it's resources, it's other acts of giving that are just as important to the steps in moving forward with the tribe's goals. But we as tribes, we've all been in the same situation where we do need resources, whether it's steps in federal recognition or providing education funds to students. The needs are various, but the impact can be huge to Indian country. But it starts with activities like we've done today and what you're doing, asking for surveys, I know that's a huge part of what an undertaking that me and the chairman have been doing, and that we're doing within the community right now is giving out surveys. It's very important to collect that data. I think Ms. Shirley mentioned that it's the data collections that are very important, even within your own communities, so that you have to know what your tribe needs. I've heard of a couple of terms today, building relationships. That is very, very important. So important that we've done that before. We've done this in our own community. We build relationships with the local churches, with the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, community youth programs, even the surrounding colleges and universities, hospitals. We use these. Our people use these services on a daily basis. So, we're able to easily give back in this sort of way. But another term I heard today was intertribal collaborations, and that's something that I really would like to explore. I think that's the whole meaning and purpose of this discussion today. Communication and participation, which I've been honored to be a part of here. It's a huge part of this whole initiative, and so that we can give back, that we can make all the decisions and execute on how we want to give back to our tribal neighbors. This is the first step. In every organization, every philanthropic effort, there will be strengths and weaknesses. Again, it takes communication, it takes community effort, it takes surveys and data to strengthen those weaknesses. I know that even in our program, I'm starting to see, where we can strengthen our own, Chairman's Cup donations. I can see the processes. I've heard Chairman Richardson with all of the setbacks. So that's up to us to, strengthen the data collections, to improve those processes, to make it easier for Indian country to receive these funds. I'm very, this is a very refreshing conversation, I believe, that we've had today. And I thank y'all for inviting us to be part of this.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And the work that Gashada is doing for your tribal community is truly impressive, and it goes back to the principle and the value of reciprocity too. And I think you mentioned it, Chairman Cernick, as well, that we have that relationship with the land, with the animals, with the plants, with the waters, but also with our people too, on giving and receiving, and the reciprocity there, and taking care of our people and our lands and waters, so that they'll be able to provide those gifts into the future. And so really want to thank you for sharing your story and providing that example to the folks on who are listening in today. And thank you for mentioning again the value of data, and Vice Chair Williams. And so I just want to remind everybody that the link is in the chat for the survey, and we do have an incentive. If you fill it out, you'll be entered into a drawing for a $100 gift card. So hopefully you filled that out. If not, please complete that survey. We do have a couple questions in the chat, and one goes directly, I believe, probably for Charlene. This talks about an SSBCI application that's due coming up at the end or the beginning of the fall, September 1. So they were wondering if you're working with other CDFIs or a consortium of tribes on this application to Treasury.
I think that's one of the most simplest applications. I'm sorry. It's one of the most complex and has heavy compliance requirements. So we are going to be looking at this next week. It has been delayed several times. 0 tribes, from what I understand, have applied. It's a very complex grant. So we are looking at it. And we have been partnering with some of the non-native CDFIs in Maine who have a few more resources than we do, but it's still work to be done. But we're looking right now to look for ways to provide some grant writing resources and for a large project that could use this type of money.
Thank you. This next question may be for the NAP team. Greg, I don't know if you saw this question in the chat, but it's asking, what sort of numbers of Indigenous fundraisers are there working in the philanthropic sector? So I've been working for Native Americans in Philanthropy for a little over 5 months. So I'm trying to understand this new world as well. I know, Greg, you've been in your prior position with the Northwest Indian College, working to raise funds from this philanthropic sector, and then now leading up our tribal nations work here at NAP. Wondering if you have any thoughts on that, on what's the scope, how many Indigenous folks do we have fundraising in this sector?
Yeah, that's a tricky one to answer, Joel. There's a lot of, because there's just so many different needs out there and different organizations trying to meet those needs. I would say just about all tribes that I know of in some form or another are involved in either grant making or grant seeking. So there's that, but then there's also Native serving organizations, and then there's also organizations that work with Native communities. So my background is education. So for about 10 years, I was working with the tribal colleges, and there's 36 of them. And so they all have, unique needs. And then you can get into multiple issues, whether it's housing, healthcare. We heard economic development here today. So all of those, there's just so many nuances of organizations that support that kind of work. But we are trying to start to quantify some of that. So I would say the long answer is I don't know if I could say exactly how many are out there, but we know there's a lot, and we are part of this listening session, and part of the past work that NAP has done is to start to pull those numbers together. And I think Dawn, I just saw here it pop up in the chat, posted one of the reports, so you can take a look at that report. And we do have other reports too that might be able to help inform this work. And then also I saw in the chat, someone asked about intertribal coalitions. So I'm going to speak about that a little bit later, but we actually have started a new tribal philanthropic coalition where we do come together as tribes and work together and learn from each other and strategize together. So I'll pause there, and I want to give the time back to the panelists while we still have them.
All right, thanks, Greg. Yeah, and I'll go to that question. If any of the other panelists want to respond or touch on that, going to intertribal coalitions, have you been working with any currently? Are they being built? And if so, how do they operate? How do they function? And I know that USET is an intertribal coalition. My background, I come from affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians, so AT&I, another intertribal organization here in the Northwest, and so we've been a coalition of over 50 tribes for almost 70 years now here in the Northwest, working on common issues and policies and advocacy. But maybe I'll ask our USET representative. Well, I see Dee and Kitki are here, the executive director and deputy director, to maybe talk about the coalition building on the with the South and Eastern tribes.
If not, I can take. I think the coalition that USET has established has been longstanding. We touched on a variety of things that go beyond the philanthropic world. And this is just something that we are starting to get into. So look forward to building more and being able to provide that technical resource to our tribal nations. We do have our Office of Economic Development that does assist with training and technical assistance, especially around the SSBCI that was mentioned earlier. But I think that strength in our partnership and our coalition has been beneficial. Our motto is strength and unity, and that has been the premise that we've had moving forward in everything that we do. When it comes to healthcare, to environmental, etc. And Kippy's just popped on, so I'm sure he's got some to add.
Joel, thank you for the question. Just a couple of things, and some folks may not even realize this, but talking about partnerships, when I first started in 2010, that was the year that USET engaged in and completed a treaty and or a covenant with affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians. So we've been operating with a covenant with AT&I in its member tribal nations now for about 12 years. A lot of that space work oftentimes happens within the policy and legislative space and working together within that advocacy arena. But to Dee's point, most people don't recognize about our organization is 90% of our funding is within the programmatic areas of health, economic development, and natural resources. Even though most of the attention publicly is about all the work that we do in the advocacy DC arena. So a lot of that work, or the majority of that work, often is within our own membership and then diverse membership across our area. But there have been times over the years where we have partnered with other parts of Indian country. So by example, several years back, we got an ONC grant for multi-million dollars, and we ended up doing meaningful use conversion work within the health sphere in 9 of the 12 IHS regions. So even though that our region, our membership is regionally based, the work that we do, to your question, in terms of partnership and collaboration, is with others. So, within our programmatic space, a lot of that work has to do with best practices and supportive work. So what we do in that area is not only advantageous for our own membership, but also with other tribal nations. So whether it's the organization directly or our members themselves, there's a lot of that best practices, learning from each other, sort of sharing that goes on in both a formal and informal sort of way. But in terms of how we approach our work, whether it's USET or the USET Sovereignty Protection Fund, to Dee's point about our strength and unity model, our premise and how we go about the work is, while our focus is to raise and elevate the voice and priorities and interests of our membership directly, it's also to help shape and influence overall federal Indian policy, right? And changing, how we think about this work and conduct this work. Well, you don't do that by just doing that within the boundaries of your own region. You can do that more successfully when you are partnering with all corners in all reaches of Indian country. So I think that that's critically important. But I think within this specific space of philanthropy, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that for the most part, Indian country has not had exposure in the same sort of opportunities in philanthropy that other sectors and other populations have. So this definitely is an area, and we are so thankful that you guys are leading the charge on this to bring philanthropy to Indian country, because it's our firm belief that there is an important story to be told here. And just real briefly, I will share with all of you, in a prior career, I did work with immigrant and refugee populations. And in that space, there was a lot of philanthropic activity and a lot of philanthropic interest. And every time I would have a conversation with those philanthropic entities, 9.9 out of 10 times, they were thirsty to learn more about Indian country. The challenge has been, how do you connect that interest to what we're talking about right now? Because in many ways, at the core of everything that we're talking about is protecting, upholding, promoting the inherent sovereign authorities and rights of tribal nations, right? That's at the core of everything that we do. But sometimes, unfortunately, with philanthropy, they think in a much more narrow, short-sighted sort of way, and they think about after-school programs or feeding programs and they look for the data to support that, rather than understanding that an investment into those core principles that we're talking about then have positive ramifications on the very things that we're talking about. So it's a matter of educating them, and that's par for the course with this work, right? We all know on this panel that everything that we do starts with a basic 101 to everybody to get them to even stand who we are before we can get to the substance of the topic. So we are just so glad that you guys are kind of leading this charge and bringing philanthropy to the table, so we have those opportunities to tell that story, so we're not invisible, to lead to relationships like I've heard as I've popped in and out of this session, which will then lead to all the things that you guys have been talking about in terms of that greater partnership with philanthropy, both for the financial and non-financial reasons that I've heard expressed.
Thank you, Kiki. And yeah, thanks for talking about the covenant that you said and AT and I have been have established for 12 years now. Geez, that was back when I was on the AT&I board when we established that covenant, and we worked on a lot of issues together since then. And I think that that shows the power and strength in Indian country when we're all pulling in the same direction. And so, as you mentioned, now this whole untapped space of philanthropy is another opportunity for us to really get together and speak with one loud voice about the needs and priorities of Indian country, and how philanthropy can partner and how tribes can lead this. We talk about at NAP, talk about indigenizing philanthropy. And taking it back to its roots. And Chairman Cernick, you mentioned the history of tribes being giving tribes, being generous, and so we're trying to change the mindset of philanthropy. And you're right, Kiki, they are thirsty. They want to learn more, and our team here at NAP has been providing that Indian 101 for a lot of these foundations, and we've only gotten more engagement interest from them to learn more about our unique political and legal status, our history, our culture, and hopefully then that will develop more strong relationships that go beyond just transactions, or like you said, then focused on more narrow initiatives or projects. It'll go beyond that to actually supporting tribal governments and our sovereignty, and really bringing back our culture, our way of life, and really perpetuating our people. That's what it goes back to. And so,
Joel,
yeah,
just a couple of thoughts. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no.
You just said something that reminded me. So, one of the other things, especially in this moment right now, with a very sharp focus on justice orientation, right? So if we can only get them to understand that aspect too, we're the first people who experienced injustice in these lands, right? So as they're thinking about ways to invest and to give, for us, our communities are the starting point for that, right? So that's part of it. The other thing too is, just looking at the panelists here, the reason why that partnership and collaboration is so critical, I'll speak regionally and nationally, like even just at the regional level, we all know that philanthropy has certain mission or giving targets, right, for different causes. So maybe we start a relationship with ABC Foundation, who's not a fit for Coushatta, but might be a fit for Chief Ann at Rappahannock, or vice versa. And just having that level of awareness so we can redirect that interest to where it needs to go to make sure that we don't lose that opportunity. Or in other examples, even if it's not within our region, maybe Swinomish has a need that we are aware of through the AT&A partnership. We can redirect that interest over that way, right? So just making sure that we're all connected in a much better way to share those opportunities as they're learning about us is going to be very advantageous.
Oh yeah, that you hit the nail on the head. And that Greg, I know you want to share a lot of good updates from what we're doing that'll speak directly to that, Kitki. And so I'll hand it over to Greg to talk about those.
Yeah, I'm just dancing in my chair here. Thank you so much, Kitki, for sharing those words. And it really is, that's what this is all about. We're really trying to be more thoughtful and strategic and to make these connections, but also in a meaningful way and from our perspective, kind of changing that dynamic a little bit, rather than a foundation coming and saying we do X, Y, and Z, and this is how we do things. We want to start from, our communities and share with them, this is what we heard, and this is how we heard that our communities want to connect and partner and really be more meaningful. So it does require having those deeper conversations, not just kind of those surface level conversations. So I'm going to share a few thoughts with you all to kind of wrap this up a little bit. I know we're getting down to our last bit of time here, and then I'll swing it back to Joel for any final thoughts. But First off, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today, and I hope that it was helpful to you all and that you learned a lot of valuable information. I want to thank Joel for just doing an amazing job as he always does, and to thank all of our panelists for participating today, and a special thank you to you, USET, for really helping to put this together and helping to get the word out. And we really did. We want to get this out to as many Native communities as possible, because as you've heard today, this is it's a growing industry, well, not industry, but it's a growing body of work that is there and is available for our Native communities, but it definitely needs to be more strategic. And I've been involved in philanthropy now enough to know that there are significant dollars that people are willing to invest in our Native communities, but they just don't always know how to do that and how to connect. So this is why this Tribal Nations Initiative is so important. And then other work, and we work with a lot of groups out there too, Native serving organizations, national organizations, to really help to coordinate and have these better avenues for those investments to reach our communities. So I'm just going to skip through some of my notes here. So I think the main thing I really want to focus on is that our Tribal Nations Initiative. So this was really NAP's really focused and an intentional effort to bring, to make these critical connections with our tribal nations. So we understood that there was a large gap between the philanthropy sector and our tribal nations and Native communities. And we wanted to, see improvements in that. And in philanthropy, and Kitki actually alluded to this, I often hear about, equity and inclusion and social justice and how that reflects on all of us as a nation. And so we really do advocate for that, that if they're talking about more inclusion, that, let's start with the first people of this nation, with our Native communities. And ultimately, we do want to move that funding dial. So that less than 1/2 of 1% that we talked about earlier, if we can move that to even just 1%, that would be an increase of nearly $5 billion. And what about if it's 2%? What about 5%? What about 10%? So there's a lot of opportunity to shift some of those philanthropic dollars to our communities. And so these listening sessions, so this is really, it's just the start. So we wanted to create more awareness. We wanted to hear from you. And we wanted to be able to quantify your needs and also elevate the work of tribal philanthropy, as we heard from the Coushatta tribe today. So we're doing 6 sessions. We have 6 regions across the nation. This is the 3rd one that we're doing. And then when we're done, we're going to develop a comprehensive report that will inform our Native communities, but also philanthropy on the priorities of our communities, what the needs are, where some of those gaps are, how we can better work together and either support things or in some cases leverage funding. I think there's a lot of great work that's happening from some of our tribes that have giving programs, but not many of them are working with philanthropy to leverage those dollars and to increase those impacts. So there's all kinds of opportunities like that will come out of the report. So additionally, this will help NAP to better inform us on what systems of support that we can develop through our Tribal Nations Initiative to support your communities in your philanthropic engagement. So we are talking about things like technical assistance, what formats that would look like in an online hub for formats where you can meet funders, intertribal collaborations, focus collaboratives. We're already doing some of that work right now. So this would be in topics like education, climate conservation work, language and culture, research. There's a number of areas that we're starting to develop and support. And so again, we're just at the start of this. We're coordinating with a lot of our national partners as well. So regional, like USET, like 18I, but also NCAI, and also some of the national foundations, and even some of the federal agencies like the Department of the Interior. So all that being said, I have some really good announcements for you all. I'm really pleased to announce that we have started this new intertribal collaborative group. And so we call it the Tribal Philanthropy Coalition, or TPC for short. So this is a group of tribal grant makers and grant seekers that meet monthly. And this is basically like a community of practice where we can support each other, we can learn from each other, we can develop strategies together and really elevate tribal philanthropy. So if you want more information about the TPC group, please contact me and I'll make sure you get added to the list. And my email will be provided in the chat for you all. And then secondly, we are doing work with focus groups on specialized topics. So for example, we have a group right now that we meet. This is a group of national foundations specifically targeting early childhood education and how we can improve investments to our programs in our Native communities. So there's a group like that that meets. There's a lot of work that we've been doing in climate and conservation work. So we meet with different organizations around that to really support whether it's our land or our waterways or species protection, all these that impact our Native communities. We also have other groups that meet, like we have a Native professionals group that meets. So we are developing systems of support within NAP in these areas. So again, if you're interested, please contact us in any of these areas and we can then link you to that appropriate collaborative. And then in terms of just big announcements, number one thing, please mark your calendars. We have an upcoming conference. It's the first time that we've been able to kind of meet in the last few years. As you all know, we've gone through some tough times, but we have our Power and Solidarity Conference on June the 26th through the 29th in Seattle, Washington. And we're doing this conference in partnership with APIP, and the link was just put in the chat there. And so you can click on that and that will help you to register. And as I understand, it's already filling up fairly quickly. So I wouldn't wait if I was you. I would register right away. And also in the chat, I'm going to release our DAP report. And this is a report that NAP recently just did. And this is on Indigenous philanthropic professionals. So as this is a growing and emerging industry, you know, we're growing more and more of our own Native people in this. And so this is a really informative report on some of the folks that are doing this work right now, some of them within these large foundations that we're talking about. And then lastly, I want to share some funding news with you all. So one of our core partners, Native Voices Rising, this is a fully Native-led organization that we work very closely with and we help raise money for them. This year, they were able to award out $2 million to 88 different organizations, all Native projects and initiatives. So we're really proud of that. And we're actually increasing our support of them. So we have a big announcement that we will be unveiling at our conference in June in Seattle with NVR. So really just so excited about the work that they're doing. In addition, we are working with a lot of these foundations, as Kiki mentioned, to kind of organize it a little bit better. And we are getting commitments from them. So we recently had a foundation that said that they are going to invest $1 million this year into supporting Native communities. We had another one that said they're increasing to $3.5 million to Native communities. And we have another group that is helping us to put together a new Tribal Nations Conservation Fund. And this is connected a lot with the America the Beautiful initiative and the 30 by 30 work that's happening. But once again, tribes have not really been heard in the way that they should and involved in the way that they should, and certainly not enough resources directed to them in the way that it should. So this new Tribal Conservation Fund, we're really excited about it. It will be a multi-million-dollar fund. And so we're working on that right now. So lots of really good things happening and much, much more to come. So I thank you all so much today for being here and for staying with us to the end. And I'm gonna swing it back to Joel for any final thoughts. So last thing I'll say is waklau to you all, which in our language, it's more than a thank you. It's very much, I'm just so grateful to you all for sharing this time with us. So take it back, Joel.
Thank you, Greg. And yeah, just Hamakas Katsiai, big thank you to everyone who joined us today, but especially you, Set, for helping to organize this and to and the wonderful panelists from the USET tribes. I appreciate all your insight, all your honesty, and really sharing your story with us here and with the tribes across the country. This is going to go a long ways in order to increasing those resources and building those relationships with philanthropy, so we can accomplish what needs to take place back on our homelands, and to really elevate and increase and strengthen the work we're already doing for our people, for our lands, for our communities. And so the timing is right. We talked about the social justice movements, the environmental justice movements, building upon Standing Rock and other movements that the administration right now is listening as well. It's the private sector, it's the public sector that are really moving right now and really want to work genuinely with Indian country, with tribes. And so now is a unique moment where we're going to really elevate the voices of our tribal nations and have them drive this work, and really increase that connection and investment within Indian country. So you played a huge role today in moving that along, and really want to express a huge level of gratitude for your time here today. And we look forward to seeing you at the Tribal Philanthropy Coalition meetings that Greg talked about, just to build this community, share these stories, and connect you with foundations in the philanthropy sector. And look forward to seeing you in Seattle at the end of June. It's going to be beautiful out here, and hope you can make it. So really appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.